maybe this is just a ridiculous thing to do at, my age. So having the perfect looking life on the outside, I think made the decision and the process to take the leap even more difficult than it would be under other circumstances.
Hello, you are listening to the Late Bloomer Living podcast. It's season 4, and here we are still reimagining, rethinking, and redefining what it means to be in midlife and what's possible as we age. We are gathering energy, momentum, and excitement for our next chapter via candid conversations with other midlifers about their own pivots, pitfalls, and triumphs. I'm Yvonne Marchese, your host, and I'm so happy you're here. Last week, we spoke to accountant turned poet Bruce Whitaker about listening to your inner voice. We are continuing that theme today with my guest, Suzette Mullen. Suzette has just written her first memoir titled The Only Way Through Is Out, which is coming out this month. I've read it and it's wonderful, truly compelling. It's a story that is very much about how hard it can actually be to listen to your inner voice when you feel like you have a lot to lose. You see, Suzette had a life that, from the outside, looked like everyone's dream life. Her late bloomer journey began with a professional change. You see, after years of raising her family, she decided to finally lean into her passion for writing, with the intention of capturing her struggles in a memoir that was about creating a purposeful professional life. But what happened was that as she started into that memoir, the narrative shifted like sand under her feet, uncovering a profound story about an intense friendship that she had with a female friend whom she had intense feelings for. So our conversation today delves into Suzette's courageous process of coming out to herself, her family, her friends, grappling with even acknowledging to herself her attraction to women. By the way, this episode is going to be the first in a series that is leading up to Valentine's Day. Our love lives and relationships, I think, can get more complicated as we get older. So I want to talk about all things love and relationship related over the next few weeks. I can't wait for you to hear Suzette's story. But before we do, I want to talk about your life for a minute. Are you still wondering, what do I want to be when I grow up? Since you're here listening to this podcast, I'm guessing that your answer is yes, in some way, shape, or form. So I think you're going to want to subscribe to Midlife Cues, which is a weekly newsletter that's all about continuing to grow and get better in the second half of our lives. It's a highly curated, well-researched newsletter about personal growth and intentional living in our middle years. It's published every Sunday. It's filled with insights, resources, tips for navigating midlife like a pro. It's written by my dear colleague and friend, Lou Blazer. It's a newsletter that I read faithfully every Sunday morning, and it adds so much to my life. Midlife Cues is a sponsor for this podcast, and my friend, I am picky about the sponsorships and partnerships I get into, so you can trust that I truly think that you're going to love it. You can subscribe for the newsletter at midlifecues.com. Okay, let's get into the meat of this conversation. Without further ado, here's Suzette Mullen. Suzette, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you. I am so excited about our conversation.
Me too. Wow. What a journey you've been on.
Yes, it has been quite a journey. It was quite a journey to live it and then to write about it, and now to be on the cusp of having this book and story out into the world. It's, yes, a journey is definitely the key word here.
Yeah. I'm thinking about, We'll let all that unfold. I'm getting ahead of myself, I think, where I was going to go just then. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey? Like backfill us a little bit into what's brought you to where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a very nice life. I'll call it Suzette 1.0 was a very nice life. I was married to a man. We had a long-term marriage. I had two young adult sons. In my view, I had struggled a bit professionally, but if you looked at my professional life on paper, you might not think that, but that was part of how I felt. I had been an attorney, and then I was a stay-at-home mom, and then I was kind of searching for purpose in a good chunk of my adulthood in my 40s and into the very early 50s. And so my nest was about to be empty. My youngest child was about to go off to college, and my then husband and I were really very thoughtful and discerning about what we wanted the next chapter of our lives to look like. And spoiler alert, there were some surprises that we did not anticipate. Um, and the first part of the late bloomer journey for me was professional change. So I did some deep thinking about how I really wanted to spend my time professionally and in this next chapter. And I had a moment of clarity where it was very clear that I wanted to really lean into my writing and also help others with their writing. And that decision launched a professional life for me, but also ended up really changing my life personally as well. When I began writing a memoir, and it was actually initially about my professional journey or my struggles to create a professional life that felt intentional and purposeful and aligned with who I was. And that writing process led me to a different story. So when I put a stake in the ground for my own writing, I began working on a memoir about a different subject matter, my struggle to create a professional life that I felt really aligned with who I was. And in the course of writing that story, I was led to a different story, and which was about a very intense friendship I had with a female friend. And that is the story that I tell in my memoir, The Only Way Through Is Out. So that's sort of the Cliff Notes version of how I got here. Uh, do you want me to talk a little more about what came next, or?
I do, because
Okay,
I what I think is incredible about your story is the courage factor. The courage that it took for you to come out to yourself and to family and friends. And how you struggled with even acknowledging for yourself your attraction to women. And in particular, they've called the midlife thing a midlife crisis, right? And I
sure.
have a whole different take on that. I know that it can feel like a crisis, but I think that there's this huge opportunity in midlife for each of us to delve deeper into who we are and who we've maybe always been and who we have tried to, I think there's parts of us that we all, through for whatever reason in our lives, whether our parents, we were trying to take in the lessons our parents were giving us and trying to please them in some way. We tend to tamp down parts of ourselves as we grow up in order to be acceptable in some way, shape, or form to somebody, to other people. And I think midlife is this opportunity to go, okay, wait a minute, I did all that, and now that's a habit, and now I think about myself habitually in these certain ways. But is that true? Is that real?
Yeah, I think that what I learned, and this is why I I expect and hope that my book will resonate with readers beyond the LGBTQ plus community. I've always had two ideal readers in mind. That's what we call it in the biz. You think about who is actually going to read this book. Obviously, a subset will be people in the LGBTQ plus community, particularly women questioning or coming out later in life. And all along, I had another ideal reader, which is really, I think, your audience primarily. It was women at midlife who were longing for something more, who were asking themselves, what is next for me? And all of this unfolded for me really because I decided that I did want to live my next chapter differently. I didn't know what that would look like at all, but I knew that I wanted. I had seen, I know you've read the book, Yvonne. On the first page, I talk about watching my friends step into their lives, and they seem to be living very fully, and they've got this glow on their face. And I knew I wanted that. I wanted that so badly, but I didn't feel like I had it, and I didn't know how to get there. And really, how I got there was listening to myself, getting quiet, being present, and listening to my inner voice. And that's what led me to first claiming the call as a writer, and then claiming the call as the writer led me to some deep truth inside me as I was writing that was about, my sexual identity. And then there was well, what do I do with that? We discover something about ourselves that we eventually trust is true. And yet we can still choose to not act on it. And I mean, in the book, there's a lot of wrestling that goes on for me about,
Yes.
First, what is really true? And then even when I can come to terms with what is true, it's still, can I do this? Do I want to do this? Is it right to hurt the other people in your life? I mean, is it okay to go after your own desires? And all of those big questions. And I mean, I wrestled for many, many, many months. And the ultimate conclusion I came to was I wasn't willing to go to my grave without knowing who I was fully. And that sort of epiphany, that clarity was what allowed me to start moving forward into a different life. And I mean, it wasn't, as you know, reading the book, it wasn't easy. And there were many moments where I would take a step forward and then, two steps back, and, trying to think, well, maybe I could make peace with the life I had, because I had a very nice life. And it ultimately, I decided that I just wasn't willing to continue to live the way I had been living, which felt like I was not living. I wasn't living fully. I wanted to glow. I wanted to be fully alive.
Yeah. One of the things that was in the press release for your book is that thing that says that you were raised to play it safe, which comes up a lot in the book. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that, and how, I think a lot of us are raised to play it safe. How do you get past that training and conditioning in order to live your best, truthful life?
Yeah, I mean, when I began this journey of actually living this story, and then even when I began writing the story, I wasn't so aware of making all the connections in my past about all the safe choices. And that's part of the beauty of writing memoir, is you're really digging into your past and you're making connections. And I started seeing this pattern that went way back to childhood. And we're all imprinted by those beginnings and those early memories. And I share some of those in the book, of when you step out a little bit, when you color outside the lines, and what happens when you do that? Maybe some people grow up in families where that is celebrated and they go on to be risk takers and creatives and all the things. I mean, I fully believe my parents did the best they could do and they meant well. And this was their imprinting, right? So they were just passing on what they had learned to me. So how did I get past it? Well, it wasn't easy. I really learned to listen to myself, and I reached out for help. I had, help as far as therapists and all the things, but I also found an amazing community of other women who were struggling with some of the same issues regarding identity and sexuality. And that they really became my lifeline. They were people that were further ahead of me on the journey, who I could look to see that there could be a positive outcome on the other side. And then there were people that were right in the same place as I was. And then later, when I was further along on my journey, I was able to, be a source of hope for the people that were just beginning their journeys. So this is not a journey to do on your own. I don't know if there are any journeys to do on your own, but this is definitely not one. And
the longer I live, the more I realize that yeah, the journey is not to be on your own. That's yeah.
Yeah. So that they, and I called them the Lalas in the book, and some of these women who I first just met online in an online Facebook support group, I have now met in person, and some of them have become my closest friends. And it's you need to find your people, whatever your journey is, it's finding your people. I mean, that's why I think communities like the one that you've built are so important, because people who are not experiencing or at the same stage of life or not experiencing the same things, I mean, they can be wonderful spouses or friends or family members, but they don't really get what you're going through, and you need to find those people who do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the reasons that I started the community part of what I do, the Age Agitators Club. There's something about having those people around you to the people that get that part of you, There's something else that I wanted to dig into a little bit, and that is that you had a life that looked that I think that you would say many people would envy. It was a comfortable life financially. It was the husband and 2 kids, and yet you were looking at your other friends and seeing what you call that glow, right? And you wanted that. And I just wanted to point that out to anybody listening, that it's so often we see people's outside, we see what they're putting out in the world and what looks good. And I call it comparanoia. And I say that because I have been there and I still do it. And, I look at what other people are doing, what other people have. I mean, really all through, especially through my 40s, I would look at other people's lives and go, gosh, why am I struggling so much? What is wrong with me? What, and now I know, after having started this podcast, that everybody's struggling. Even if somebody's done something and they've figured out one part, like even the people that I've had on, and they've been through something, they've figured something out, is generally why I'm having them on, to talk about that journey, right? And then I have friends tell me, "Oh, your guests are all so amazing, but I could never." And I'm like, "No, that is not the point. You got to hear the point that's that they struggle too, even no matter how impressive somebody looks on paper,
Yeah. I can so resonate and relate to what you just said, Yvonne. In my 40s and even into my early 50s, I was way into all the comparison. I love that term. What did you say? Comparanoia or whatever?
Paranoia.
and
Yes.
paranoia. I
It's
love
often
that.
what comes up going through social media feeds, when everybody's
Yes,
showing you exactly what they
yes.
want you to see.
Yes, absolutely. And for me at the time, it was about I was comparing myself professionally. I had been an attorney early on and then, left the law for various different reasons. And I didn't build a career that I thought I would build. And so many of my other friends and were just soaring in their careers, at least they appear to be. And you see the highlight reels, right? I mean, certainly on social media that's what you see, and you don't see the other parts of it and the other struggle. I think it's really difficult to just completely wipe that out and never compare yourself again. I'm sure there are people who can do that, but I think now the difference is that I recognize when I'm doing it and I can kind of step back a certain amount. And yes, you are absolutely right. I believe that we're all just trying, we're all struggling in some way. We may have, certain aspects of our life we may have figured out, which is great. And there's always something else, right? And so none of us have it all together. And there might be people looking at me saying, oh, she came out and she's got another perfect life and she's got a book coming out and she's a book coach and all this thing. Yeah, all of those things are true. And every day I struggle with self-doubt and fear and all the things. And I mean, I coach writers as well as writing my own book. And I mean, I'm constantly sharing with them my own how do I cope with managing fear and doubt? And because that's part of the writing process. It's part of being a human being, I think. And anyone who claims to have it all together, I'd be a little suspect of them.
Yeah. I always call that the hard candy shell when I meet somebody who is not willing to acknowledge the any part of the struggle. It's like, because it's under there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think that, going back to my story and the journey that unfolds in The Only Way Through Is Out, part of the challenge for me was when I was wrestling with, do I stay or do I go? That do I stay in my life or do I leave it and start a completely new life over? Was that there were people in my life that could not understand how I could possibly leave this very, very nice life that I had because on the outside, it did look pretty darn perfect. And there were a lot of very, very good aspects to it. And so it was when other people would raise doubts to me about like how can you do this, and I'll leave the details to the book when people read the book, but there were several family members that were initially not very supportive, and then that raised doubts for myself. It's like, well, maybe they are right. Maybe this is just a ridiculous thing to do at my age. So having the perfect looking life on the outside, I think made the decision and the process to take the leap even more difficult than it
Yeah.
would be under other circumstances.
Yeah. I totally see that. You know, I think a lot of what was in that struggle that I interpreted from reading the book was that idea that, well, isn't it enough? Don't you have enough? Like what it's
Yeah.
like the battling that idea of, is this selfish? How can I do this to my family? It's that what's wrong with me question. And what is, will I ever be happy? Even if that was something you struggled with quite a bit, was will I ever be happy question. Like if I even decide to embrace this part of me, am I still going to be unhappy? Do I risk that?
One of my book coaches said to me, you need to get really clear about what is at stake here. And that's a term we use when we're writing a narrative, is like, what's at stake for the protagonist, who is me in this memoir. And really what was at stake was this safe, comfortable, very nice life that I had built. So that was what was at stake, is if I left that not knowing what was going to be next, I was losing, or potentially losing, this very nice, safe, comfortable life I had. And yes, that whole idea of, is it selfish to want more? And I also really wrestled with the whole question of, like, maybe some people aren't capable of joy. Maybe some people aren't capable of being happy. And there's a couple of scenes where my then husband really, asked that question of me, what's it going to take to make you happy? And I didn't have an answer. And I really did fear, if I wasn't content in this very nice life I had, how did I know how I was going to be on the other side? And I think there's a line in the book that goes something like, if I'm going to be unhappy either way, I might as well stay in the unhappy I know, right? The which is a very nice life. And so I think this is where I hope my story will resonate with readers, particularly women at midlife, is that it's very scary not knowing what the other side is going to look like. We know what our life looks like, and whether the good, bad, and the ugly, but we know what our life is like, that the life that we're living today. But then when we choose something different, whether it's a career change or a relationship change, or in my case, all of the above, and we really don't know what it's going to be like on the other side, it is really, really scary. And
it's that point where you just want a freaking crystal ball, right?
Yes,
it's
you
like,
do.
can you just throw me a bone here?
You want the crystal ball, and we don't get that. And I wanted that so badly. I wanted to know I was doing the right thing. I wanted to know that this wasn't a giant mistake. And I mean, at the end of the day, all you really can do is listen to yourself and then do the best thing that you think is the right thing for you. And you shared some questions ahead of time, and I was thinking about them. And one of the questions was like, what do I wish I had known before I made the leap that I know now? And I think what I wish I had known were two things. One is that it was all going to be okay on the other side. I mean, I didn't have to know what okay looked like, but it's actually way more than okay. But I'm okay. My ex-husband is okay. My kids are okay. I think that we think that when we make a change, yes, was it difficult? Was there pain? Was there hurt? Yes, but everyone is okay on the other side. And had I known that, it would have, I think, been easier to make the leap. And then the other thing that I wish I had known was that I was much more capable than I really believe myself to be, that I was capable of starting over at midlife in every sense of the word. I was capable of doing life on my own. I had been with my husband. We started dating when I was 22, and we were married at 25.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, at the time, I didn't think I was a baby, but now I look at that and I think I was a baby. And, I was married at 25, and we had a 30-year marriage. And so my whole adult life, I was partnered with this one specific person. And the idea of just all of the sort of practicalities of doing life on your own, doing my taxes for the first time since I was 21. And I mean, and lots more. I mean, the nuts and bolts things. And then just, being a person who isn't a married person, being a single person in the world, and learning to do life on your own.
It's a big
it
deal.
was it was a big deal.
When you've been in a relationship for that long where somebody has stepped in and kind of done certain things, and those things were all handled by that person, you've become reliant on that. And how do you know what you're capable of until you actually have to step in and do it? And I think, like, 99% of the time we're going to find out that we are way more capable than we ever realized we could be.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I have grown so much in these intervening years. I mean, I think as I was walking over to record this with you, I was trying to do the math, like how many years has this really been? And so I'd say this journey for me began in the about 10 years ago, which was when the nest was empty and I decided that I was going to lean into my writing, and that's what led to it all. But then the big leap when I decided to leave my marriage was in 2016. So we're talking 7 to almost 8 years ago at this point. And I I've grown more in those 8 years than I can tell you.
So here's a question for you. From the time when you realized, when you had the aha moment, that first moment of going, oh, wait a minute, uh, the
Yeah,
sands are
yeah.
starting to shift, and all that, from that point to actually making the decision to go ahead and be on your own, how long was that actual part of the journey?
Yeah, so depending on exactly where you put the starting and the ending point there, it was somewhere, it was about 18 months
Oh,
of
18 months of what?
18 months
Oh,
of, and there were some months, particularly in the beginning of that 18-month period, where I wrestled a little bit, and then I tried to put the genie back in the bottle. I tried to go back to my very nice life, and then, one step led to another step, and then I did get to a point of no return where I really had to literally, well, not literally, but I had to decide, am I going to leap? Am I going to jump? And so there were those periods where I felt like I was creeping up to that edge of the cliff and peering over. And it wasn't fair, really, to my then husband or to myself to keep being in limbo. Limbo was a
mm,
very hard place to be. And I needed to either decide that I could make peace with my life and live with this longing and be have as strong of a marriage as I could possibly have with my husband, or I had to make the decision. And so it was about 18 months, and that period of time was very, very difficult. Very
yeah,
difficult.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. If you're somebody that's grown up as risk averse and making safe choices, you don't all of a sudden just kind of, turn on a dime and become this other person. And I did my journey the way I had to do my journey. I think that's another lesson I've learned, is that there isn't a timetable that is the right timetable for everyone. There are many women that are in the support groups that have kind of, they've thought about, oh, I wish I had regretted that they didn't come out sooner or make this decision sooner. And I mean, that's their story and their journey. Fantastic. I never really felt that way. I felt like I was ready to face this part of who I was when I was ready, and not a second before. And
mm,
I don't regret the life I had before. I had a lovely life and there was a lot of very good in it. And I have a very different life today, and it is also a lovely life. I've been very fortunate, frankly, in life and love, even though at times it felt not so fortunate and lucky. But in
Yeah.
retrospect, being on the other side, I feel that way.
Yeah. I'm so glad you just said that because for anybody who's in the middle of some sort of limbo, I have certainly been through limbo periods of my life or periods where, there's two different things that are going through my mind right now. Part of it is like the sort of limbo that you're in where you know that if you make a certain choice, it is going to literally blow up your life. That is super
Yes,
scary. And then there's the other kind of limbo where you just know that something is off and you don't even know what's off. And that can take, I've been in that kind of limbo too, and that can take a really long time to even figure out what's going on, and part of it is like giving yourself grace. I have a friend who says grace and giving yourself grace and space, you know, that it's your journey that the less you can beat yourself up if you can possibly manage that, the kinder you can be to yourself through the process. I don't even know how you do that though, right? I think maybe beating yourself up is just part of it. But if anybody's
well,
doing that right now, I just want you to know you're not alone, and this can take a long time and then tomorrow you may wake up and you may have an aha moment and go,
sure.
oh,
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the beating yourself up because I, well before this whole revelation about my sexuality, when I thought the biggest issue in my life was figuring out my professional life, I spent a lot of time beating myself up for not making different decisions as I was about my professional career. And one of the healing gifts of this writing journey has been finding compassion for my younger self, finding compassion, looking at her, because when we're writing memoir, we're viewing ourselves as a character. So looking at the younger Suzette as understanding why she made some of the choices that she made. And it wasn't because she was stupid or, a bad person or any of those things. It was that, she was doing the best that she could do at the time. And I I spent a lot of years, when I was in that comparison mode and why didn't I do this and why didn't I do that? And I've really been able to let go of that. And that's been
mm,
really, really healing.
I bet it
Yeah.
has. Yeah. I wish that for everybody, truly. Mm. So, my goodness, I'm looking at the clock going, wow, how did that happen? What is going on next for you? What are you excited about that's coming up?
Well, truth be told, I'm very consumed right now with all the things promoting my book. The Only Way Through is out.
Right,
It's really
because you and I are,
exciting.
I'm sorry to
Yes.
interrupt, but you and I here, we're
Yeah.
sitting down and we're talking. It's December 14th, but this episode isn't going to go out until the end of January. So I just want to point that out to anybody listening. So really what's coming up for you is the actual release of this book.
Yes, yes. So the book is going to be released on February 13th, and I'm lining up bookstore events. I've got my first event. My book launch is 2 days after the book comes out. So right now I'm very consumed with that. I also am running a business, book coaching business, and I primarily work with memoir writers and particularly LGBTQ plus memoir writers. So I'm still working on all of that. And once I'm on the other side of what I hope will be a successful book launch, and I take a lovely vacation because I'm going to need it after all this travel, I'm going to get to work on my next book. I have already sketched it out. Tentatively, it's titled After the Leap, because I really want to, this book, The Only Way Through Is Out, is about what leads up to the leap and the decision making and then actually making the leap. But the book ends very shortly after I make the leap. So that the book ends, the events of the book end in June of 2017. So here we are almost 7 years later, and there's a lot that's happened in those 7 years, but it's really about what I've discovered. And one of the things I know I want to explore is this idea that grief and joy you can hold both of those at the same time. And when you do make a big leap and a big change, there is both of that, because there has been a grieving process of the losses that I have had, the life that I had before. And like any kind of grief, it's not linear and it pops up occasionally. So I really want to explore those two emotions and holding them together. So that's what's next.
Wow, what a great idea. I love that idea. And the idea that we can hold grief and joy at the same time. I think, wow.
Yeah. So, and I'm hoping it'll be a little easier the next time around, writing the second book and getting it published and all the things. I do, but we'll see. That we don't have that crystal ball, right? So I've learned enough that I know that there will be bumps in the road and ups and downs. And, writing a book is an emotional roller coaster for sure, as is making a big change at midlife. And it's worth it. One of my takeaways of my book is that there is a cost to authenticity, whatever that looks like for you. But in my experience, it's worth the cost for sure.
I love that. I think that's the perfect place to go out on, Suzette. Thank you so much for being here with me today, for sharing the hopefulness that's part of your journey. That's what I think is here for anybody listening. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. I appreciate having the opportunity to chat with you.
Me too. Well, there you have it. Oh my goodness, the courage that it must have taken for Suzette to do that, and then to go deep back into it to write about it. Whew. One of the things that she says, well, there's a couple of things that she says that really have stuck with me. Here's a quote. The transition from a seemingly perfect but unfulfilling life to a more authentic one involves grieving the losses, but also experiencing moments of joy. Yeah. I mean, it's been true for me. You have those moments of intense transition in your life, and they definitely come with grief for what was lost. But there can, at the same time, be intense moments of joy involved. She also said there is a cost to authenticity, whatever that looks like for you. But in my experience, it's worth the cost for sure. I have to say, yeah. I mean, but it's so hard to go through. We want a crystal ball, right? But we forget how powerful we are. We forget how strong we are. And speaking of that, I mean, the third quote that really stands out for me is she said, the other thing I wish I'd known was that I was much more capable than I really believed myself to be, that I was capable of starting over at midlife in every sense of the word. I was capable of doing life on my own. You are more capable than you believe. Am I talking to you, or am I talking to myself? If you want more information about Suzette Mullen and her coaching services for authors, you can find a link to her website in the show notes. There will also, of course, be a link where you can get a copy of her book, which is coming out hot off the presses any moment now. You can just go to latebloomerliving.com/podcast and look for episode 171. Thank you so much for coming here, spending this time and listening. Hey, if you got a hot minute, I have a favor to ask. If you are enjoying this podcast, I would so appreciate it if you could head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening and leave a review to help other people find it. Thank you so much. I hope you have a fantastic week. Stay safe and well. Talk soon.